Perspectives series, and today we have with us Soumitra Basu, who will continue on his exploration of the previous topic. And so we decided to make this follow up in two sessions. The first session would be on the typal worlds, on the typal personalities and avatarhood, that is today, the involutionary beings, as it were. And the next webinar, next follow-up will be on the nature and the role of the soul and the purpose of rebirth in Sri Aurobindo's unique concept of karma and the new being. And these would be all evolutionary beings. So it's quite interesting. We separated into two webinars. The first today, we will focus on involutionary beings. That is the typal worlds, non-evolutionary typal worlds and their role, and the personalities of the divine, which are also typal beings, according to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and avatarhood. So let me introduce our eminent speakers. Some of you already have been through previous presentation, but today, those who are new, I would say a few words about him. Dr. Soumitra Basu is a psychiatrist by profession, working with consciousness paradigms. He conducts workshops on personal growth and is a founder editor of Namaha, the Journal of Integral Health. He has authored the book Integral Health. He is deeply interested in the vision of integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother with regard to mental health. He has developed a module of consciousness-based psychology, and together with Michael Miovic, has authored a book, it is in the press now, which looks at psychopathology and counseling from an entirely new perspective that arises from the experiential teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. He can be accessed on or at consciousnessbasedcounseling.com. Please, Soumitra.
Or maybe, Dr. Basu, if you wouldn't mind, I would just say a couple of things for all participants. You're more than welcome to show your video. It would be very, very nice if you're comfortable. And I put in the chat box, Dr. Basu will be pausing periodically to take questions. So if you have questions, just type in the chat box the word question. And when we get to that, then Vladimir will be calling out your name and you can unmute yourself, ask your question, and then Dr. Basu will address. Thank you.
So thank you, Radhe, and thank you, Vladimir. And thank you all participants who have given me this opportunity to be here in this wonderful, of course, it's evening here in India and it's morning there, but this time. And we'll be continuing from what we had discussed about on the first day of our session. When I had been talking about the ascent and descent of consciousness, of evolution and involution. And we'll be just, I'll be showing you a bit of PowerPoint presentation so that you can get the link with one or two of the older slides, because you have seen the PowerPoint presentation, I think most of you, because it was sent to you, but others would be new. The other slides would be new. But to begin, the concept of evolution and involution and involution, that is a very unique concept which is given by Sri Aurobindo. And you see, in Indian tradition, evolution was not considered to be a very important subject. It was dissolution or prolai, that the creation would get dissolved, except in one or two places, like the parable of the 10 avatars. You had the parable of the 10 avatars, which is described always in the literature, where you have the amphibian, the fish, and all these, the dwarf avatar and all that, which shows that inkling, that knowledge was there, present. But somehow it was not developed in a way, it was developed in the Western philosophy, the evolution, how the way it was seen there. But Sri Aurobindo sees evolution from a very different perspective. And his evolution is an evolution of consciousness. He is concerned about the evolution of consciousness, and he is concerned about a cosmic evolution, about a cosmic evolution. So, and for that, the first thing that he started to think was, or to present was, that evolution cannot start from a blank, from a zero, from where it is starting. It cannot start from zero. So whatever is evolving must have been involved prior to the evolution. Of course, I'm using the word prior, but again, just remember, all these things are happening simultaneously. So you should not link them in linear time. So there, you see, it's a non-temporal phenomenon. You see, you should view them in a non-temporal way. But before something evolves, whatever is evolving is also involved. It is involved as a potentiality. It is involved as a power, and it is from there that evolution will take place. And but then the most important question is that we are having or witnessing an evolution of a progressively conscious being from an essentially inconscient substance, inconscient matter energy, from an inconscient substrate, something which is totally inconscient, no? The matter of what you call the matter, or all the things from which physics and chemistry evolve. From there, something is evolving, and what is evolving is a progressively conscious being. And this, Sri Aurobindo says, is a very big paradox. And this is what also people who are working on consciousness research, they are also saying that this is a paradox. This is a paradox, and it is very difficult to solve this paradox. And Sri Aurobindo begins his adventure into the realms of consciousness by asking this question, and then bringing an answer. And while asking this question, he is also concentrating on another very important issue, which was also always there, and which is how one can become many. We say, always we have said in our Indian tradition that the many issued from the one. But how did one become many? So we'll just have a view of the PowerPoint presentation. We'll shift there, and then we'll slowly progress. If there is anything, you just raise your hands, or as Radhe has indicated, that I will stop, and then we'll come back again, or we'll answer the question, or we'll see that how we progress. So is that is this okay, or something has to be done? Sorry. So this is the dilemma, that how qualia can develop from non-qualia, how a conscious being can emerge from inconscience. And together with it is linked the metaphysical query, how one is related to many. Because in Indian tradition, always consciousness was considered in its very pure aspect, and in its very pure aspect, it is known as Chit. Actually, this creates a confusion, because when people who are working with consciousness, scientists, biologists, evolutionary scientists, and people who are working with modern physics, when they talk about consciousness, they might be talking about something else. When Indian spirituality talks of consciousness, they actually refer to something which is very pure, which is also called Chit. Now, in English, we use the same word consciousness for the pure form of Chit, and also for the thing which people, what neurophysiologists and scientists and all other use when they talk about matter energy, or when they talk about life energy, and when they use the word consciousness. You see, the same word is used by everybody, so that it creates a confusion. Are they talking about the same thing, or other things are unrelated? But Sri Aurobindo has an integral view, and because because he is an integral view, he relates the pure chit with everything else. He relates it with matter energy. He relates it with all other things with which people are working in different spheres of consciousness. But then he has the onus also, because he's relating them, that how he can relate them, how the one can be related to many. So that question he has to answer. And it is a very difficult question, because, as I said the day before, that as Swami Vivekananda had said, that this is a question that has not been answered for thousands of years. For thousands of years, it has not been answered. And he said that there was an explanation given in the Indian tradition, that it was due to illusion or Maya. You see, Maya or illusion. Because of the Maya, this thing happened. But then again, Swami Vivekananda was very specific. He had said that Maya is a descriptive term. It describes the phenomenon that one became many, but doesn't explain. And then Sri Aurobindo will explain, because Sri Aurobindo is the first person who is going to explain very methodically how one becomes the many. And together with it, it is also, he when he is explaining this, he is also bringing into the other existential question, which David Chalmers, who is one of the foremost consciousness researchers in the world, he has said that we have explained everything of consciousness, but one question, a fundamental question, we cannot explain, that how can a world of colors, a world of variability, a world which is so qualitatively rich, can develop from the substance of, from where physics and chemistry evolve? How can a conscious being can emerge from that inconscient matter? So that is something which he calls the hard problem in consciousness. And then Sri Aurobindo relates the two. You see, when he is giving an explanation, he is relating the two. But first of all, you see, when you see this question, how can qualia develop from non-qualia? This itself, that this question itself has to be seen from a different light. You will now understand. We now understand, because something else is also happening in scientific research. And what is that? Is that a new paradigm, a new way of looking at matter is also emerging. Why it is emerging? Because now we believe that, and it has been demonstrated, that subatomic particles like leptons and quarks, they cannot be subdivided. Why? Because at a certain point they lapse into formlessness. There's no form. Now, this is very interesting, because in science we are always trying to build models, and for models we need building blocks, and we need one fundamental building block from on where we will construct the other, the higher things we will construct. So you need something at the basic building block you need, like that of the atom or like that of the cell when you talk in biology, or the atom when you talk of matter. But the bottoms up model becomes no longer tenable if something is when we realize that, after all, if the leptons and quarks can lapse into formlessness, you cannot build something from that foundation. So then the question is not how to look from below up, but how to see from above how things are organized. So you have to see from a different perspective how things that are manifesting, how they are organized, how they're going to be, how they're going to manifest, how they're organized in something. What is that something? It's an ethereal expansion, it's something, or whether it is the Brahman, you see, whether whatever you call it, that is something is there which is vast, which is expansive, which is something like an ether. You can call it anything. Might be it is below the inconscious, is not only the inconscious, or it is the inconscious, or below the inconscious, it is something which is itself holding the inconscious. Something broader than the inconscious is there below, which is holding it. So then whatever evolves has to be seen how it is manifesting there, how it is organized there, how it is arranged there. So then the question becomes not from, you look from below up, you cannot build a model like that as you build in the physics, in the laboratory, in the physics laboratory. You cannot build a model like that. What you have to see, you have to see from above and understand how things are getting organized. So this is an interesting thing. And so in the metaphysics, now we come to metaphysics. And when Sri Aurobindo is when answering this question, is shifting also to the metaphysical reality, because from there he can relate the two. And this we'll find that actually his understanding of metaphysics is giving an explanation that how we can understand the whole thing. And you see that metaphysical reality was always conceived in India as a triune principle of Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. Existence, consciousness, and bliss. Now, why it is called triune? Because they are not additive principles. They are not additive. It's not Sat plus Chit plus Ananda. It is the same thing in different poises. So, on one poise, it has an existential aspect, that is a Sat. In one poise, it is the aspect which is going to manifest, that is the Chit. And in another poise, it is the value aspect that is being given to the whole thing. That's the Ananda. Now, Sri Aurobindo has modified this Satchidananda in two ways. In two steps, he has modified. So he has accepted the ancient Indian knowledge of Satchidananda. He has only modified it further. And what modification he has done? Because this modification is necessary to understand what we are wanting to answer today. And so Chit is not only awareness. He modified Chit. He said Chit is not only awareness, but also force, also energy. Chit Shakti, or consciousness force. Because unless there is force, the consciousness is ineffective. So consciousness and force are intertwined. So in consciousness itself holds the Shakti or the force or the energy. And the energy is itself maintained by the knowledge or the awareness or the consciousness. So it is not only Chit, it is Chit Shakti. And then of course he had to explain, this is in the Life Divine. If you are interested, you will see that he has spent a lot of lines in describing how this force can be at rest or in motion. It is very important because it has practical implications. You see that consciousness force, that force in the consciousness, it can be at rest or in motion. It is important because this can be replicated down also in our manifestation. This can be replicated, which is there very high above. It can be replicated. You see, that is why Sri Aurobindo I could say, because of this concept, we could derive this concept. We could say that, you see, if you have an inner poise of stability, then that outward activity can be supported in a more dynamic way. If you have an inner poise of stability, the outward action, the outward energy can actually be supported in a more dynamic way. It is a very practical thing. I'm just diversing. I'm just shifting and just telling you an application of this. You see that in today's world, that one of the most important things in which people suffer during stress is the condition where we are always competing with time. You see, we are always competing with time, and there is a poise of timelessness which is behind us. And if you can cultivate the poise of timelessness, only because that can be done because the Chit Shakti can be at rest or in motion. So if you very logically, if you cultivate that poise of timelessness inside your system, then your action in time will not make you ill, as people become ill when they suffer from stress. You know that people who are suffering from stress, many of them suffer from that type of personality when they are too much active, they are too much dynamic, but they do not have a poise of inner stability. So you see that what is there, what Sri Aurobindo is describing very high above, it has got an amplification, it has got a importance, a significance even down below. And that is why, because we could construct this model of stress management in our integral psychology, where we teach people to have a base of stability to support the outward activity, only because Sri Aurobindo described that the force in Chit Shakti can be at rest or in motion. So this is very important. It's just not a theoretical or a metaphysical postulate. It is a very important psychological postulate. Now the second thing Sri Aurobindo modified, the Satchidananda, then he said, because besides the three fundamental principles, so there is a fourth principle also, and this fourth principle is a supramental truth consciousness. The supramental truth consciousness, which is a power of self-determination of the infinite. So actually this triune, he made it into a quaternary. This triune he made into a quaternary. Of course, the supramental truth consciousness will be formed by the condensation of the Satchidananda. It is Satchidananda itself which will be condensed, and it is from it the supramental truth consciousness will be formed. But in a very practical way, it is once it is formed together with Satchidananda, the supramental truth consciousness has now become a quaternary, and that quaternary reality is now going to be very important, because it is that which is going to decide, or it is going to formulate what is going to be manifested, and to bring the manifestation to the goal which he is wanting. We will see what goal he is wanting. We will be actually talking about that when we will talking about evolution, because Sri Aurobindo is wanting to take the evolutionary trajectory to its point where it can reach. You see, the evolutionary trajectory has come up to the mind, but Sri Aurobindo says that the mind is not the summit. The mind is not the summit. So there is something beyond the mind, and to go beyond the mind, the supramental truth consciousness has to be considered together with Satchidananda. Why others never considered it? Because before Sri Aurobindo, this concept was not there, that you can evolve beyond the human mind. You see, from in India, it was always that from the mind you can jump into the infinite. From the mind you can jump to the great void. From the mind you can jump to the nirvana. From the mind you can jump into the Brahma. But Sri Aurobindo accepts that. He acknowledges that shift from the mind to something very higher, to the featureless absolute. He accepts that, he acknowledges that, but only he points that there is another trajectory that is possible, another road can be opened. And what is that? That is, that evolution will proceed beyond the mind, and will bring up newer and newer beings which are higher than the present human being, with newer powers of consciousness. And to that, so to realize that, to make it a reality, so that he had to modify the triune concept of Satchidananda into the quaternary concept of Satchit, Ananda and Supermind. Otherwise, that what he is wanting, that to bring the evolution to a further development, to bring it to the supramental principle, to bring in the what we call the supermen of the future, that will not happen. So this is why there's a practical reality why Sri Aurobindo is wanting to bring the supramental as the fourth of the fourth principle of the ultimate reality. Now in involution, what happens? The supreme reality is undergoing progressive self-imitation. Involution is what? Involution means that the supreme reality comes down into the inconscience and gets concealed as a potentiality in the inconscience, and from there it will evolve. So involution is the phenomenon that is preceding the evolution. So before something evolves, whatever is evolved is involved. It is involved in the inconscious. And how it is involved? The supreme reality will come down. How it will come down? It comes down by progressive self-limitation, by condensation, by densification, and it goes, and this movement goes on, that it is getting progressively limited, progressively condensed, progressively densified. Ultimately, it comes into the inconscious, as if the fiat was that let there be darkness, because the inconscious is darkness. It's just the opposite of the superconscious. It contains all the opposite things of which the superconscious represents. If the superconscious has light, the inconscious has darkness. If the superconscious has knowledge, the inconscious has ignorance. If the superconscious has love, the inconscious has hatred. If the superconscious has joy, the inconscious has sorrow. So you see, all the opposite things are there. So it is darkness. So there was as if somebody had uttered that let there be darkness. Of course, when evolution starts, then there will be another voice saying, let there be light, and then there will be growth towards the light. And now, so when this thing is happening, when the supreme reality is coming down, progressively limiting itself, progressively condensing, it is not happening in the way in which we think that it is happening as a straight line. It is a very complicated phenomenon of descent, because I told you that it is an extratemporal phenomenon. We can't understand it in a very linear way. So it is not descending in a linear way. There are parallel lines of descent. So this is what we had discussed the other day, that Sat of Satchidananda it descends as the self, and then it actually becomes the soul spark in the inconscious. The Sat descends as the, and it is Sat which is present as an existential reality of existential essence of everything in the world, and therefore that everybody, we can say that everybody is the representative of the same self, or the self represents everybody. And finally, when the self descends into the inconscious, it becomes a spark. That is important. Why it becomes a spark? Because in the inconscious, everything is going to be deformed into the opposite, but you can't afford to for the soul to be deformed. Huh? That you can't afford. So if it is a spark, it is difficult to deform a spark. A spark is just a point, so you can't deform a point. A point is a point. So that is why the soul will be present as a spark in the inconscious, but everything else will be present in their what you call, in their original forms, so that they can be converted easily into their opposite forms. Chit Shakti descends to produce, of course, Chit Shakti again descends to produce many things. It produces the non-evolutionary worlds. It produces the non-evolutionary worlds. So next day we'll talk about the evolutionary world. But before the evolutionary world, there are non-evolutionary worlds. And then it also comes down as the personalities of the Supreme Being. So the Supreme Personality breaks up. And also, and it's very interesting, that is also recognized in everywhere in all traditions. Only Sri Aurobindo is organizing them in a unique way when you recover the meaning of all that has been explained in different traditions, and then as the avatar. And then the Chit Shakti is also descending as the avatar, which the day before we didn't have time to discuss, but we'll discuss a bit today. And then Ananda descends to support the play and give value to it. Again, is just to remind that this phenomenon is happening, all these things are happening simultaneously. It is not that in linear time you are thinking that one is happening and the other is happening again. Everything is happening simultaneously. So we don't relate them in terms of time. Now what happens when the descent occurs in the involutionary descent? So centers of precipitation are produced, matrices of creative activity are produced, and in these matrices of creative activity, the unity crystallizes and weaves patterns of harmonious multiplicity. So this is very interesting, that while it comes down, it is producing the centers of precipitation. So it is not coming down like that, falling like a fountain water. It is falling from a great height down below, but while it is falling down, it is stopping at places, it is precipitating at places, it is forming matrices at places, it has halting stations, and like we have these space stations in the space, so it has got halting stations, and where the unity is crystallized, and then something around that unity, a harmonious multiplicity. Why harmonious multiplicity? Because the unity is still trying to hold the multiplicity, but unity is actually the secret essence of that multiplicity. Even if the multiplicity afterwards at the end will not be aware that it had issued from an unity principle, but still the secret occult fact is that it was always the unity which was permitting or facilitating the multiplicity. Now, the first step in the descent of the transcendent is descending into the cosmic consciousness, and the first thing that they descend, it is descending at the vast and varied supermind. And what is the supermind? As I told you the other day, that supermind actually is running a software program. It's running a software program where the reality, the spiritual reality, which was unmanifest, will be made manifest. You see, it is a program that is making the supreme reality that was unmanifest, it will make it manifest. To make it manifest, you have to run a software program like that, and this program is run in the supermind. And in the program, what will be produced are the seed ideas or archetypal realities. You see that, not archetypes in the Jungian sense, but spiritual archetypes, or they call them real ideas, or the seeds. They are the seeds, or the templates on which the manifestation will be built. The manifestation will be built on templates, and these templates are being what you call commissioned in the supermind. They are being prepared there. At the same time, they are not separate. They are being held in the unity of the supermind. The supermind is a principle of unity, and in that matrix of unity, it is still preparing templates, it is still preparing real ideas, it is still preparing archetypal realities or spiritual real archetypes, which will act as what you call forerunners of whatever is going to manifest. And here there is perfect unity, though it is manufacturing things, though it is producing things which are which would be a bit different from the unity principle, but they are based in unity, and therefore each contains all contains each in absolute unity and identity. So the supermind is a very tough thing to understand. We can't do justice to it into today. I think we'll need many more sessions to understand what actually is the supermind, because it is a supreme creative consciousness. It is there where the creative idea is getting crystallized. You see, in the Sachidananda, there was no movement, there was no manifestation at the level of Sachidananda. It is only the supermind, it is trying to make that unmanifest Sachidananda manifest Sachidananda. So therefore it has got a great responsibility, and it has to perform that responsibility with precision, and it is very difficult. You see that, and because why very difficult? Because it is going to permit infinite possibilities and potentialities, and when you want to do something which is of infinite potentiality, then you can end up in chaos, no? You have all sorts of people coming in, all sorts of things coming in. We have a program where everybody can walk in, then there will be chaos. It is like that when the supermind is trying to bring the what was unexpressed into expressive reality, and for that it has to permit everything. It has to permit infinite variations and possibilities, and to permit infinite variations and possibilities, it can also produce chaos, but it is not producing chaos, because the supermind also has got a will which is putting things into the proper place, and that will is called the divine Maya or the higher Maya. Now, when the supermind, so that's the first plane of the descent. The first involutionary descent occurs with the supermind. But the supermind is not only just a descent like that. Once it is formed, it is becoming a part of the quaternary principle of the absolute reality. And next comes the overmind, where there is an emphasis on the many, though there is unity. You see, in the overmind, there is an emphasis on the many, though there is unity. So unity and multiplicity are complementaries here. In the supermind, the multiplicity is coeval with unity. Unity is there in the multiplicity. They are not separate. They are all intertwined with each other. But in the overmind, they are correlates, but there is an emphasis on the many, though there is unity. So there is an emphasis, and you see, this is, I will not go, you don't have to go to the whole slide because you might not be able to see it if you are having a mobile. But I'm just wanting to tell you that in the overmind there is an unity principle, and which is actually permitting many real ideas to develop. You see, the real ideas which were there in the supermind, they come and they develop themselves in the overmind. So they were the seed ideas that were in the supermind. When they come into the overmind, they develop further. From one seed ideas, you have got many seed ideas will come. So there is the primary seeds are there in the supermind. When they come into the overmind, each seed idea can give rise to other ideas also. They are also very higher ideas. They are at the level of the overmind, but all these ideas at the level of the overmind are having what you call ruled by an unity principle. So there is an unity principle which is pervading them, which is actually lording over them, and it is this unity principle which is lording over them, which is the God, which is the what you call the God of the Godhead of the overmind. You see that how do gods appear? You see, what we call God, the overmind God, the main overmind God is the one God, the unity principle, who is lording over the other real ideas, and these real ideas are archetypes, the overmind archetypes, no? Because when they, from the supermind, when they come to the overmind, they develop further, and these developed ideas, they will go on to build their own worlds, they will go on to build their own manifested what you call portions, which will form a great reality. So that is why they are also gods, they are also the godheads. So if you consider that there are in the overmind, all the principles are there which are going to manifest and which are going to create something, represent something, manifest something, which are of infinite variety. Many things will be manifested, but behind all the manifestations, all the ideas that go on manifesting the multiplicity, there is an unity principle, and the unity principle is the main God, and then the others also that which go on which go on representing the overmind. They are also gods, but they are also projections of the one God. So all the overmind gods are all not separate. They are not separate. They are projections or they are ramifications of one single principle. They are projections of a single God. So that is what Nolinida had very nicely has said, that it is the one God who is called the Agni or Yama or Matariswan. It is one God again, but who is described as having 1,000 feet, as 1,000 arms, because all they are separate entities. Also the different gods which are going to actually manifest different aspects of the creation, they are all separate entities, but each one also is being, each one is also being what you call supported by the oneness, by a secret oneness. So the overmind gods are creators in a world of balanced or harmoniously held difference. They are powers that fashion, and each has a certain role to perform, and they all enhance one another at the same time. You see, they are not competing. It is the lower gods who go on competing with each other. The overmind gods are not competing. They are all complementing each other. They are all what you call supporting each other. They are all enhancing one another at the same time. And so these are the real gods, the first gods. That is why the word, the gods, when we use, if we trace the concept of God or the Godhead, then we have to go to the overmind, because the at the overmind, then why not at the supermind? Because the supermind, the supermind is just running the program that something will manifest, that all the principles that will that are going to manifest will actually start their work from the overmind. But in supermind, it is just the idea, it is just holding the creative essence of whatever is going to happen. So they have not formed as gods, or they are not formed as in a way that they are going actually to do the work. In the overmind, these formations have become what you call active, dynamic, so they are going actually to manifest. So what they want to do has been decided in the supermind, but actually the work starts from the overmind when the manifestation has to take place. So therefore the gods are referred when we talk about the overmind. We don't talk about the gods in the supermind. And the next step of descent from the overmind is the mind. Of course, between the overmind and the mind, there are also other planes. But the next step, important step of descent is the mind, where unity is very abstract. In our mind, which is a representative. Now I am talking about the typal mind, not about the evolutionary mind. Here, the next step of descent, when I am talking about the mind here, I am talking about the typal mind. I am not talking about the evolutionary mind. We have an evolutionary mind, but you see that in our evolutionary mind, which is also derived from the typal mind, there is no unity in a very concrete way, no sense of unity. No? Unity is an abstract notion, and it is ego which actually rules, and the synthetic vision is lost, because we have an analytic vision. We don't have a synthetic vision. And between the overmind and the mind, there are supracognitive planes, which are the planes of intuition, the planes of illumined mind, higher mind. They are actually powers of the overmind functioning in the mind. So these are actually the powers of the overmind functioning in mind. Mind you, we are talking about all these things: intuition, illumined mind, higher mind. We are talking about these things. We are talking about the non-evolutionary planes of consciousness. I'm not talking about intuition. When I'm talking here about intuition in the general sense, when we speak of intuition, it's a different kind of thing. It's a different plane of consciousness. That's why when Sri Aurobindo used the word intuition, when he was describing the spiritual mind range, he was not using the word intuitive mind, so that we don't confuse. He was using the word intuition separately. So then there is the illumined mind, there is the higher mind, and so there are powers of the overmind functioning in the mind. We don't have time to go into the full meaning of all these things, but just try to remember that they are supracognitive matrices. We have our cognition, but above our cognition are the supracognitive fields of the intuition, illumined mind, and the higher mind. And then further descent from the mind occurs when they come to the vital, and in the vital also there are levels. So that is a higher level of the heart or the emotional center, and very interesting, because behind the heart or the emotional center, Sri Aurobindo brings in something else, the psychic being, which is again a different concept. then we have the higher vital of egoistic dynamism, and then we have the lower vital of petty desires and impulses. And the last step, when we come to the typal world of matter, where consciousness has become totally pulverized, and by the time when we reach matter, the supreme will has become a mechanized drive. It has become a mechanized drive where electrons blindly rotate in their orbits, yet the electrons know that they have to rotate. The electrons, if they decide today that they will not rotate, what will happen? The world will collapse. That means that is a very important thing. You see, Chit Shakti in the supreme reality, they are together. They are together. Consciousness and inner force are there together. So that slide I have not shown. I will just explain to you, but it is a very important concept. I should have given that slide, which was more important than this slide. That Chit Shakti, very, very high above in the superconscious, in the transcendence, they are together. So what is Chit is actually covalent with the energy, and what is energy is automatically it is luminous with knowledge. And down, deep down, when we go, when the supreme will has become a mechanized drive in the electron, we see that there is a memory of that consciousness force. A memory is there because the electrons are rotating mechanically. But of course, there is a secret knowledge that is why they are rotating, and that is why they are not stopping their rotation, because it is a responsibility. Now they have to maintain the creation, but that is not a conscious one. It is an unconscious responsibility. It is a hidden responsibility. So it is a hidden knowledge. So that Chit Shakti, which is very high above, has also, when it has come down into the electron, it is there as a memory, and it is a very important memory. The electron is not forgetting its task, a divine task, a great task that has been given, that it has to go on and doing its work. Otherwise, the whole creation will collapse. And you see that it knows that it has to go on rotating. So its energy is covalent with a secret knowledge, and that energy is blind, and that knowledge is occult, secret, hidden, blind, but still it is there. Now, what happens in the human mind? What has happened? The consciousness and force, the Chit and Shakti, which were together intertwined, always very high above and blindly below, they have become separate in our mind. So, in our mind, knowledge and will have become separate. So, knowledge, if I can have great knowledge of what to do, or if I want to free my country of drug addiction, I have knowledge, but I don't have the force or the energy to execute that knowledge. Or I might be a person with a great energy, but I don't have adequate knowledge to support my energy. So with my energy can go west. You see that my energy can go west. So this is a problem in our human life, that in our case, in the human, there is a dilemma that is there, that the consciousness and force, the Chit and Shakti, have become separated. And our task in sadhana, our task in spiritual path, is to bring them together. And we have to go on striving so that the consciousness and the force, they come together. So that is the sadhana that we have to do from the consciousness perspective. When people ask me what is from the consciousness perspective our work, I would say that our work is to gradually rise up and to bring the knowledge and the will together. It is very difficult at this level of functioning, of the present level of functioning of human mind. They are not there together. Sri Aurobindo says that we have to go on striving, and actually it is in the supermind that they will be what you call coalesced in a perfect way. Until we reach the supermind, that coalescence of knowledge and will not happen in the most perfect way. We can't expect that. But it is our work that we have to go on doing. And the more we do, the more we progress, and the more we become effective tools of the divine. So that is very important. It is a very important thing. Now, these typal worlds, last day we had talked a lot about these typal worlds. So we will not go very much into details, just a little bit, that they are non-evolutionary worlds. And there are other worldly fields. You see, it's not about our world, the other worldly fields. These worlds do not progress, and they are not determinative. They do not have matter as a starting point. You see, because they do not have matter as a starting point, you cannot view them with your external senses. You see, our external senses, which are part of our system, our sensory physiological system, they belong to our superficial personality, to our outer being. With that, because the superficial senses are arising in our material body, so we can't use that material senses to understand the non-evolutionary worlds or to perceive the non-evolutionary worlds. So what we have to do, we have to go and develop our inner senses, inner being. So Sri Aurobindo talks, Sri Aurobindo explains that behind our outer being, there is our inner being, and behind the inner being, there is an inmost being. So our being itself has many levels, and we have to go to the inner being. And when you go to the inner being, you can develop subtle senses, inner senses. And when you develop inner senses, then only you can have an inkling of what are the non-evolutionary worlds. But Sri Aurobindo has said, in the Life Divine, he has said that these other worlds, they have hidden links with us. This is very interesting. These other worlds have hidden links with us. And so influences come to us. They come in dreams, they come in visions, they come as inspirations, they come as intuitions, they come to us. And in talking about this typal world, I'm just reminding you, if anyone of you is interested, you can go to this famous chapter in the Life Divine in the second part, where he talks about the different theories of existence. And all these four theories, the first three theories, actually the fourth is his view, the first three theories are known separately. Throughout the history, they are known separately. So there's a supracosmic theory of existence, which actually is concerned with the transcendence. It is concerned with the superconscious. For them, everything else is secondary. So the earth and everything else, what you call, is secondary. It is the transcendence that is the most important thing. The superconscious, that is the most important thing. All other things such as derivatives are ephemeral or temporary or something like that. It is not important. Important what is the supracosmic view of existence. And then you see number C, that the cosmic and the terrestrial, which is our field of life, which is which is there for all the material mindset, which knows about our terrestrial existence, and they are not interested in other things. And then there was always some or other inkling of the otherworldly, what you call, existence, the supra-terrestrial existence. All religions have conceived that there are other planes other than the world. There are heavens, there are hells, or whatnot like that. Might be something between heaven and hell, and many worlds have been described, but they have been described in a very scattered way. Now Sri Aurobindo is integrating and reconciling all the things. So when he believes that the supracosmic is actually one which is producing the cosmic and terrestrial, and while producing the cosmic and terrestrial, it is having as a condition and connecting link the supra-terrestrial or the typal worlds or the otherworldly existence. So in only Sri Aurobindo's view, you see all the different views of existence that have actually existed in the thinking, what you call, in the thinking paradigms of the world. All the things has been reconciled by Sri Aurobindo. So people have either they have been emphasizing more on the supracosmic, or people are only dealing with the cosmic phenomenon, and Sri Aurobindo relates the two, and then as a support between the two, as a link between the two, he brings the supra-terrestrial or the otherworldly phenomenon. So this is a very interesting thing. So that is the integral or synthetic view that reconciles all above. So if you see the culmination of understanding all this, the involutionary worlds or the typal worlds, you will be very satisfied. One of you, if you find it interesting, and then you will have a satisfaction if you read this chapter of where he's talking about the different views of existence and how he is relating all the four together. Now the forces, this is a slide which I had shown in the previous one. There are two slides that I will be repeating. So this is one that you have already seen, that in the typal worlds there are the higher powers, which are the powers of light, and the lower typal worlds there are the powers of darkness, and the powers of light have been symbolized as gods, goddesses, angels, heavenly messengers, holy spirits, because the aesthetic sense of the human mind wants to give symbolic forms to all powers. So everybody has a symbolic form. So like that, everybody, even atheists, have symbols. The communists also have symbols. So we all like to have some symbolic representations of our ideas, thoughts, and visions. So there is nothing wrong in that. And the power of darkness have been symbolized also in very interesting, because the powers of light have been viewed differently by different traditions. But the powers of darkness, all people have a common knowledge of the powers of darkness, because the darkness was there in the beginning. is there. In that darkness, we had to bring in light, we had to invoke light, so that the darkness is so important. So everybody in all traditions in the world, they recognize the powers of darkness. So Satan and devil are represented in different ways. Only in India we view them in a different perspective. The same thing, that is Satan and devil, we view them as Asura, Rakasha, Pisacha, and as the beings of the mentalized vital, middle vital, and the lower vital worlds. And then we have the elements, the elementals described by theosophists. And so this is a very interesting thing. So the typal worlds actually are there, they are there, but they are not just hanging there. They are not just hanging there in the cosmos for just to be there. They have a purpose there. They have a purpose there, and that purpose will fully understand the next day when on the next Sunday when we talk about evolution. Then we'll see that from the typal worlds, there is something that is descending at every step of evolution. So each step in evolution is being helped by some force in the typal world. When evolution is occurring, then there is an evolutionary force from below, which is actually stimulating something to come up from the inconscious. But to come up from the inconscious is difficult, because the inconscious can drag anything down because of the force of gravity. The inconscious is very powerful, so it can drag anything that is coming up down. So something from above has also to hold it. Something has to pull it, and that pull, that holding is done by some force from the typal world. So when the mind is manifesting, the typal world of mind also is something is descending from there to help and to what you call lift up that mind principle from the inconscious. So one, it is coming from below, but at the same time it is being helped, it is being pulled so that it doesn't sink. So while it is emerging from below, the mind is emerging, but something from the typal world of mind is also coming and pulling it up or holding it and securing it so that it doesn't fall down, it doesn't lapse into the inconscious. So at every level, the typal world is actually working to help the evolution. So when the life energy is coming out from the inconscious, something from the typal world of life energy is coming and helping. So when the matter is coming up, something from the world of matter is coming and helping. At every level, the help is there from the typal worlds. So they are not just there hanging in the cosmos like that. They are always there to complement and supplement all the evolutionary effort, the great work that they are doing. And also the other day that I told you that was interesting, that because something is always descending from the typal world, from the non-evolutionary world, otherwise you cannot manifest that consciousness in the evolutionary scheme. Something you cannot do that unless you have that help from the typal world. That is why it is very difficult to produce consciousness in a laboratory. You see, we want to produce consciousness in a laboratory, but then in a laboratory we can work with our evolutionary paradigm, but the non-evolutionary paradigm is always there. So together with science, mysticism will always be there, spirituality will always be there. So they will always be there as complementaries. One cannot say that one is absolute, one is alone working and the other is not working. So that is why the tribal worlds are very interesting and is something that you can develop. And it is also a seed idea that I am just presenting. We can of course afterwards elaborate and understand this. Now the consciousness force is also the consciousness force is also coming down as the being. And see, the Sachidananda is not only Sachidananda is not only the what you call is not only a what you call a manifestation in terms of planes of consciousness. It is also a being, and it is a personality, and it is as Shishamani say that one cannot explain the appearance of consciousness out of inanimate matter unless one accepts a being behind who applies the force and also becomes matter. And it is this being who is descending. Now because time is very short and I will not go into the details, the other day that we had talked about this, that how the being is descending from the supermind to the overmind between, and it is descending as in the supermind it becomes the seed realities of Ishvara and Ishwari, it becomes in the overmind it becomes the abode of gods, between the overmind and mind the lesser gods, in the mind it is the ego bound individual, it is the Asura in the vital. Always the Ishvara and Ishwari, the masculine and feminine aspects are always present, but they are always not so. Feminine aspect also becomes very much visible in the vital, so that in the vital when you see the Rakshasa, but also there is also the feminine aspect as guardian angels, gods of beauty, Gandharvas, Kinnaras, and the lower vital you have the ghosts and all that. And in the consciousness touching matter, at that level you have the personality degenerates into imps, goblins and other things, and in the matter inert particles. Again, we are not going into that because our time is short, and we just go to avatar because we have to have some time for discussion. So the supreme secret, there is the descent of the avatar. The supreme person can descend directly in plenary self, not only through intermediaries. You see, the supreme person can descend directly. The supreme personality is breaking down. In the other slide that we saw, that the supreme personality is breaking down at every level, it is breaking down. But it can also come as an embodied personality. And when it comes as an embodied personality, he is known as the avatar. And the avatar actually is a descent. An avatar actually is a descent. So he is needed. Why he is needed? Because he does two things. At every step in evolution, he is helping mankind to take one step forward in the evolutionary trajectory. He is helping mankind to take one step forward in the evolutionary trajectory. And his physical presence stimulates the physical nature that is obscure to wake up for transformation. The physical presence stimulates the physical nature because the physical nature is obscure. You see that Christ had to take in all the suffering of the world. He had to take inside his own being. And when he was being crucified, and that is why it is always said in the tradition that for one moment when he was being crucified, that all the suffering in the world was not present because he had absorbed them in his own consciousness. So you see, the physical presence is necessary. So they are the firstborn of the new supernal race. So that is necessary. Now an incarnation is the divine consciousness and being. It is a Chit Shakti which is manifesting to a physical body. Now what is interesting, that is, it is in this is Sri Aurobindo's lines, Sri Aurobindo's sentence, that this incarnation is possible from any plane. That means that at any plane, the consciousness and force of the Chit Shakti can become organized and descend as an avatar. So the descent is happening from a typal world to the evolutionary world, from the non-evolutionary world to the evolutionary world. So at the level of mind, something can actually, an avatar can come down as a embodied consciousness force to the evolutionary mental plane of humanity, to the evolutionary mental plane of humanity. From the level of overmind also, the consciousness force can come down as an embodiment, and to help humanity to reach a plane which is just above the mental plane, or to bring something else. We'll come to that. So and what we call the universal or the transcendental mother principle is the embodiment of the Chit Shakti, which we saw in the supermind in its Ishari poise. You see, the transcendental mother principle, which we call it, which is also represented in our mother, whom we call as the mother in Pondicherry in our ashram. She's the embodiment of the Chit Shakti in the Ishari poise. Now, very interesting that Sri Aurobindo and mother are dual avatars, embodying the Ishwar and the Ishwari poises of the Chit Shakti at the level of the supermind. Their mission is the establishment of the supramental in earth consciousness. I will explain this. This is a difficult thing. Now see, as I told, that from every level of the typal world, there can be a descent to the world of evolution. At every level, there can be a descent. So what Sri Rama is representing, a descent from the typal world of mind, to the evolutionary mind. Why? Because he is wanting to bring what is known as Ram Rajya, which is a Swatik civilized human being, who is a society which is governed by reason, by finer emotions, and by ethical ideas. You see, the Asuras, Rakshasas, and the Pisachas, the demon, the Satan, they have no respect for reason, they have no respect for ethics, they have no respect for finer emotions. And to rule over that chaos, that Sri Rama has to bring into the what you call the paradigm of the mind principle. He has to bring into the proper, what you call the proper ethical poise, or the proper poise where the civilized human being will actually govern life. and civilization will actually happen, civilization will flower. That is the meaning of Ram as an avatar. Ram didn't go everywhere and talk about religion and talk about God. He didn't do that. His presence as an avatar is important because he is bringing a ethical phase into humanity. He's bringing a phase which is going to have a rule of what you call of a swatik, or a very highly developed, highly finesse in the human mind has to become and has to develop and has to govern human life. That is Ram's work. Now, again, from the level, you see, another interesting thing which Sri Aurobindo said, that what Rama's work is a continuation of the evolutionary process. So by the normal course of evolution, it was necessary for the avatar of Ram to come down from the mind principle, from the typal mind or the non-evolutionary mind to the evolutionary mind. It was necessary. So it was falling because he had to help the evolutionary process. Now, Buddha and Shankara, Sri Aurobindo considered them to be a bit different. They also descended. Buddha and Shankara, both of them descended from the mind, from the typal mind or the non-evolutionary mind to the evolutionary mind. Why? To show that the mind is not the final thing. The reality is an absolute featureless unity, an absolute featureless reality, and something that is absolutely featureless. No, that is what you call, you cannot describe them by terms. So that is an absolute which cannot be described by terms. Buddha went in his own way and Shankara went in his own way, different ways, but both of them went to the same thing, an absolute featureless reality. And so that the mind is not one, we do not, because the mind has got limitations. Even though Sri Rama did that ethical poise, brought that ethical poise in the human mind, but then remember, at that time the knowledge of the supra-ethical was not known, which Sri Aurobindo has introduced. Sri Aurobindo, the many new things that he has given to the world, one of the new things that he has given is that is a supra-ethical poise. See, ethics is not the last word in the human civilization. That is a supra-ethical poise. It is not non-ethical, it's not infra-ethical, it's supra-ethical. And then that knowledge was not known. So at that time, what Sri Rama gave was very beautiful, very important, but had its limitations. And then Buddha and Shankara came to show that the mind, because of its limitations, must know that it has been projected, or it is not as important as the featureless reality, which is very, very much beyond the mind. Only Sri Aurobindo said that they overlapped other stages. You see, there are other stages which they had overlapped, and they had ignored the dynamic side of liberation. They had ignored the dynamic side of liberation that they had ignored. Now, it is not out of ignorance that they had ignored. It was their work. That was the work that they were doing. It was a particular work that they were doing, and that is because of that work they had to leap the other stages and to go, and also to ignoring the dynamic side of liberation, ignoring the Ishwari aspect also was necessary, because they had a certain work which had to be presented in a what you call an absolute way, and it was necessary for them to do that. Because you see, afterwards Buddha also came to the mother in our vision and told her, when mother finally took the decision that from Japan she has to come to Pondicherry, it was Buddha who came to the vision and showed by the hand that the land of India, and then she brought the ticket afterwards. And then at that time Buddha said that I have come to you as I have known you before, and as I had known you, and he showed, and what you call he showed that he had actually known the mother. So that means that, which shows that she was aware of the Ishwari principle, but might be for some reason which we don't understand fully, that something had to be kept aside for something else. Now, what Krishna did, Krishna is also an avatar, but as an avatar he is coming from the overmind, and is coming to the evolutionary mind. And then Sri Aurobindo said that he is leading by the normal course of evolution. And why he is doing, he is coming and showing, you see, something else which Buddha and Shankara had left incomplete. You see, when Buddha and Shankara, the world was so full of illusion, and so that you have to go to something which is beyond all illusion. And for Krishna comes and says and explains that there are actually a higher nature and a lower nature. So there is a higher nature and there is a lower nature, and Sri Krishna is there in both in both the lower nature and the higher nature, with the lower nature which is modulated by the ego and the higher nature which is beyond the ego. Sri Krishna is equally comfortable in both, but he is showing the way how we can lead from the lower nature to the higher nature. He is not abandoning the lower nature. That's why he had to advocate war, because in the lower nature conflict is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable. Why conflict is inevitable? Because the lower nature is the nature of multiplicity, where ego is dominating. That means everybody has to be unique, and if somebody has to be unique, it has to be cost of another. If your football team wins, it has to be at the cost of the other football team who is losing. So there will always be a inequality, and for in that sphere you have to always have a strife, war, conflict. So Krishna, that's why, had to consent to war, because at that time no other option was available. But at the same time, it was his mission to lead from the lower nature to the higher nature. That was Krishna's work. And now, this is again Sri Aurobindo's sentence: the next normal step is not a featureless absolute, but the supermind. But the supermind. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo has to come down from the supermind as the dual avatar, the dual incarnate power, so that one step ahead they go beyond Krishna. What is that? That the lower nature has to be transformed in terms of higher nature. You see that Sri Krishna was, as an avatar, was leading the person, the human possibility, potentiality, from the lower nature to the higher nature. And Sri Aurobindo is going one step ahead, because his aim is not for the featureless absolute. He is wanting to transform the world. He is wanting to have a new world, a new transformation, and for that the lower nature has to be transformed in the what you call, in the light of the higher nature, in terms of higher nature, or what you call, the higher nature has to come and possess the lower nature. You can look at it in that way also. That's why we are very lucky at this time that they are the dual incarnate avatar. They are the dual incarnate powers that is representing the supramental avatars, and that is why they had to come as a dual power of Ishvara and Ishwari. Otherwise the whole thing would have been incomplete. I think that I have spoken quite a lot, and we have now time for questions, amplifications, and not only questions, that if some of you, any of you, want to add to this insight with other insights that you are free to do that.
Thank you, Soumitra. That was quite a feast of knowledge. Full plate of things on involutionary forces, typal worlds, how they appear as personalities going down as gods, smaller gods, and finally the interaction. It's like a ladder which is supporting our evolution. We can step and match our evolutionary process with the involutionary levels, and that is becoming established. Beautiful. Thank you. So we are open to questions. There are several questions already posted here. I do not know how we would do. Maybe I will just...
So they're seeing the questions in the chat box. These are the questions which have come in the chat box.
Yeah, they are all in the chat box. You can click on the chat box and you can see those questions by yourself.
So these are questions where of personal growth mostly, that how can one develop timelessness internally. Actually, that first of all is to understand the different parts and planes of the being, to understand the structure of the human being from Sri Aurobindo's perspective. And then you see that from the outer, behind the outer being, there is the inner being, and in the outer being everything is intertwined. So you cannot separately understand the physical, mental, and vital. As you go inside, you can understand them in their separate dimensions, and otherwise you will not be able to go inside or what you call integrate all these things. And once you go inside, then you can have a feel of timelessness when you connect yourself with the cosmic consciousness. So this is a question of personality development. I think we can have a separate sessions on this, how to understand our inner being, how to connect with our inner being. But I will say that question to Mr. Prakash Nair, that you can first go and you can see the structure of the human being. You can understand that is the first step, and then you can see that how you can delink ourselves from the ego. You have to delink from the ego. and that is a very difficult thing. Now, delinking from the ego is so difficult. Another thing would be much easier if you just concentrate on the psychic being and let it come forward. And then also, I think that would be an easier process for people who are we turn towards Mother and Sri Aurobindo. For people who are not turned, they have to start working from the ego, which is more difficult. But if you go to the psychic being and you start working from there, then it is easier to come to the inner being, from where you can expand to the cosmic consciousness. Then you will have an even understanding of timelessness. But at the being, I will tell you that try to find out in your life areas or which are areas or provisions which are not linked with time. Everything is not linked with time. We are always linking everything with time, and that is our fault. So there are many things which are not linked with time. So find out that. That is also an important start. As Sri Aurobindo said, that it's something in also in every teaching, every philosophy, there is something which is perennial and something that is temporal, and you have to find out what is that which is perennial, which is always there. And this is the question, that is matter ultimately or not that hold forces from descending further into the inconscient? Yes, yes, of course. That is why you have the physical world, because in matter there is a certain grossness has come, and because of that grossness, that is a one of the most important properties of matter is resistance. And unless there was resistance, we would not have a very strong and durable physical world. The physical world is a world that has to be durable. No? It cannot be very ephemeral, flying or floating like a world of emotions or ideas. So it has to be very durable. And for durability, you have to be solid, and to have the solidity, of course, you have to have resistance. And that is why what you are saying is true, is it not? And to develop force in Chit Shakti, that is also something that consciousness and force, and at our level we have to do that how to bring consciousness and force. So there are different ways in which you can do it. For our in our system, I think that you can start with concentrating on the psychic being, because if that comes forward, it will be easier for you, though you have to work also at the supracognitive spaces, where you have to understand the higher consciousness, and where as you go higher and higher, you go to the higher mind, you see automatically that mind and the energy that is following that mind, they are you don't have to forcibly relate them together. They are already related there. So you have to practice going out of your cognitive space, and to go to higher spaces above the mind. So once you go to the higher spaces, when you reach those regions, then you gradually will be entering spaces where knowledge and energy are there together. Of course, at the beginning will be there in the preliminary stages, but still you can have a beginning. So I say that when you are meditating, you just make your mind silent, and after you have been succeeded in making your mind silent, you can shift your consciousness from above your mind to a poise above the mind, above the cognitive space, and then try to spread it out, and then try to visualize that you are getting influences from very high above in that plane. So Jesus, Muhammad, and Ramakrishna have in evolution. Of course, they had their own things. Jesus had to come, and you see that he had to bring the what you call the world of suffering. He had to imbibe himself in himself, and he had to bring that compassion in a new value, brotherhood. He had to give a new value to brotherhood. He had to give a new value to comradeship, and to that he had to bring these universal suffering. He had to bring it inside his own being, so that people could understand what was suffering. And then Sri Aurobindo has said that Jesus was propagated love, universal love, but love was incomplete. Love was not, it was incomplete because he didn't have that force. You see, he didn't have the force also to save himself. That is why prophet had to come, and he had to bring in the force, because love has to be supplemented by force. And you see how powerful he was, that from Arabia to Indonesia, the religion spread so fast. Only in India, it could not engulf the whole of India because of the very strong Vedic and the Vedantic roots. And Sri Ramakrishna has a very great role in the evolution, because it was he who first started that all the religions are the same, which are there in the overmind. That in the overmind we know that all religions have the same. That is what he lived. It is not only a theoretical postulate, but he lived that consciousness of everything was the same. So that was a very great thing which he did. And oh, what Natalia said, how do you explain this grasp of consciousness and suffering to an old-fashioned Western trained psychiatrist who very difficult? That I think Natalie herself is more very best suited to answer that question, because she knows both the worlds. No? You know it better than others. So, so of course, Buddha and Shankara took different approaches to reach the absolute. One was, you see, it is difficult to tell a very complicated thing in such a short time. But rest assured that, you see, one was, you see that how to solve the problem of the negative things in the world. One was that you forget the world and go to the Brahman. You see that you go to the Brahman, which is free from everything. So both Buddha and Shankara took that route because the world was very difficult. You cannot have perfection in this world. But one approached it in a positive way by positing positive absolute in the positive way, and Buddha went it by negating everything. So it is the same thing. Sri Aurobindo has explained that it is the same thing that they reached, but one had reached it by negating everything, and Shankara took it in a very positive way, that it was that which was the only thing that was important and other things were unimportant, and Buddha went there and nothing was important, so only the zero or the nihil was important. But then Sri Aurobindo said that they look different because they are things that are they are pertaining to the areas which are above our cognitive mind. So that because we do not have cognitive terms to explain what is beyond the cognitive world, that is why we don't understand that they are actually the same thing. So Vishnu, this is Sri Aurobindo's very favorite. Vishnu is very favorite of Sri Aurobindo, because you see that Brahma is creating and Shiva is destroying, but Vishnu has to preserve, and more importance was always given to Brahma for creation and for Shiva for destruction. But in the middle, Vishnu was preserving, and then Sri Aurobindo wanted, mother also wanted, that Vishnu's work was to Vishnu's work has to be extended. Why? So that this time, this manifestation is not dissolved. It goes to its intended path. You see, every time mother said that when a manifestation took place, every time the manifestation was dissolved or the pralaya happened, because something was missing. And then mother said that this time that nothing should be missed and it should go on. So that's why Sri Aurobindo wrote that famous line, Vishnu's stride, that famous phrase he used in the Life Divine, Vishnu's stride, because he wanted to extend Vishnu's work. So that is very important. And I would say that as it is not only just an overmind work, it is more than an overmind work which Vishnu is playing, but which mother wants Vishnu to play, or mother wants Vishnu's act to be prolonged, which is actually going beyond the overmind. And you see that what is the meaning of all this thing in existence? We don't, you see the why of everything. You see the how science can answer when or how. Science and mysticism can give some inklings to that. But why all existence, why everything, is very difficult to answer unless you come to the Indian position that is a motiveless Ananda. That is an Ananda bliss that has no motive. You see, everything in the world which we strive to achieve has some motivation or the other to exist. Only the Ananda of Sachidananda is absolutely free from any motive. It is absolutely free from any motive. So it is totally motiveless. It's just there for the joy of being there. And that is why this creation, this manifestation, all these things that have taken place. That is why we have always in India, there was a common saying that the world is a lila, or the playfield of the gods, or the playfield of the Supreme. So other than that motiveless bliss and motiveless Ananda, it is very difficult to explain the rationale that why everything is there. So this is why we said that this gives the value aspect to the manifestation. Sachidananda in Ananda, if Sat gives the existential aspect, and Chit Shakti gives the what you call expressive aspect, and then Ananda gives the value aspect of the manifestation. What is the nature between, this is the first question that was asked by Charles, what is the nature of and distinction between consciousness, mind and awareness? What is the first cause, mind or consciousness? Consciousness. Consciousness is, you see, again, this question is difficult to answer if we don't know what we are speaking when we are using the term consciousness. That is what I first told. When we Indian spirituality talks of consciousness, it talks of chit. And when we talk of consciousness in our modern terms, we talk about consciousness, which is a product of matter energy, which is a product of our awareness, which is a product of our brain. And we are using the same term for everything. That is why all this difficulty arises. But if you come to Sri Aurobindo's viewpoint, there is a basic substrate consciousness is there, which has different formations at different planes, at different poises. It has different formations. So at the very high poise, it is something, and at the middle poise, it is something called the mind, and it is actually below it is the same thing. In another poise, it is the matter. So it is consciousness which gets formulated in different planes, in different poises, in different expressions. So it is the same thing. But you have to understand that what we are speaking, whether we are speaking of the same thing or we are speaking of different things. If we want to link spirituality and all this thing of matter, energy, and mind in our today's terms, then we have to use Sri Aurobindo's paradigm. Otherwise, it will be difficult. It is very difficult otherwise. Then we will be confused because we are using same term for might be two different things which we are thinking. So the universe is, of course, consciousness. Sri Aurobindo believes that the transcendence actually has produced both the universe and the individual, and it is self-manifesting. In a way, it is self-aware because it is self-manifesting, and this self-manifesting is growing. And the whole reason of manifestation is to become self-aware. You see that it is self-manifesting, but it is at the beginning it is not self-aware because it is there as it is. Well, the whole purpose of manifestation is that the becoming becomes conscious of itself, becomes aware of itself. So the becoming is self-aware, of course, and this is the reason for the manifestation to take place. Otherwise, the unmanifest would have existed and nothing would have happened, and there would have been no, what you call, no self-awareness. Once the manifestation has come in, then the question of self-awareness comes, and because to be conscious, because to be aware of the self, the whole thing is being enacted. I think Vladimir would add something. You should add something because with your experience, I think you could add something to already what has been said.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. This is a quite full plate of vision of the involutionary typal worlds. Maybe one should mention that typal worlds or typal beings are those who are not evolving, who are not changing.
Not changing.
There is no change in them. So they're staying as they are. So to say they may act differently in different contexts.
I'll say one thing.
Mm.
Always in the Indian stories, we find that if some being from the tribal world is coming to the earth, he has to possess a human being. Otherwise, he can't work because a tribal being doesn't have a psychic being and he cannot work on the earth. You see, always the story that somebody was walking on the road and Indra came and possessed that person, and then he starts his work. So even the ghost also, they have to possess. You see, that's why we have the possessions by the ghost in mental illness. Always there is a possession. Either the possession is by the gods or by the possession by the ghost for some other work. So there is always a possession of the human being by beings of the tribal world because they cannot work directly on the earth. They cannot do that.
Yeah, and there is another reason the mother says also that if these even great gods want to change, then they have to come down and be embodied in the human form, because only then they get the capacity or the possibility to change. Can you imagine? To grow into another dimension of consciousness, to change their views, to change their qualities. And so the change is taking place only through embodiment in the on earth, mother even says, because earth represents that psychic being of the universe where changes take place. For real, not changes like actions.
I'll give an example. When mother said to Durga once, that you change your strategy so that you don't have to kill the asura comes and surrenders to you. So when during Durga Puja in Calcutta, we have artists who make Durga Puja idols. And just at that time, when mother said that, from that period onwards, some of the artists in Calcutta who are making Durga Puja idols, they stopped asuras fighting Durga, but one very big artist made a very famous Durga image where the asura was actually offering a bouquet of roses to the Durga. You see, then I had told, he had passed away, and I told his son that your father had taken that vibration, that wave which mother had issued, even without knowing, because he was a very sensitive artist. But that what mother had issued, that statement that was there in that what you call cosmic consciousness, and because your father was a very sensitive artist, you take that, and you see immediately he had changed that. The whole thing had changed, and it was so beautiful to look when the Usura has come with a huge bunch of flowers, more than a human being can hold, because the Usura has to hold a very big, what you call, a super basket of flowers, and then he is offering it to the mother, to the Durga. You see that I found that even so, in subtle ways things change. We don't understand how things happen, but in subtle ways things go on always changing.
Yeah, that is regarding Durga. It's also a very famous interaction of the mother with Durga, who actually, being a typal being, because gods are typal beings, they kind of consider themselves to be totally the supreme, the divine, and they act in a particular way, but they consider themselves to be the divine, came down into the mother's body. It is described in Agenda, Mother speaks. She came down into her body, and mother gave her to experience her psychic being, what it means to be evolutionary being. And for the first time, Durga felt what it means to love the divine. They do not have that love which human beings have in the psychic. So that love changed her, and she said, "From now on, I am a bhakta of the divine." Durga said, because she never had this. She considered herself to be the divine. So this is the difference between typal, involutionary, and evolutionary beings. By the way, many of those, Vivekananda, for example, mother says that Vivekananda was involutionary being. He came here with a mission
It
to
was a
accomplish
vibhuti. So vibhuti is also
vibhuti.
vibhuti.
It's quite interesting to think in those terms of typal, involutionary, and evolutionary beings. So we are very privileged here to grow and to change. The change can take place only on Earth, and that would be the topic of the next seminar, and I'm sure it would be very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Soumitra. That was wonderful, wonderful session. A lot of food for thought. So we are inviting you for the next session next Sunday. So please come, and we will continue our evolutionary journey from now on.
And
Okay.
Dr. Basu, I'd like to thank you too. And if it's possible to send Vladimir or I your set of slides from today, we'll make sure that everybody
Yes,
gets
yes, yes.
a copy of it.
I send them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.